Chris, here's your resume. You were a member of the SWAT at the 1993 Branch Davidian siege in Waco, Texas, which we talked about. Gary Nessler, we had it on. You were there for 51 days. You've been deployed to Egypt and later chosen to open the first, I believe, FBI office in Milan, Italy, handling FBI operations there for 3 years, which I'm sure you had a good time in Italy. You've conducted dozens of interviews with detained Al-Qaeda and Taliban leaders and operatives, which maybe we'll get to that here in a minute. But out of all these crazy things you've done, I think we have to talk about McDonald's first. For whatever reason, that one's getting the most attention. So this phone call comes in from the informant to kind of walk us through what really happened. Was it McDonald's? I heard it was really a marketing agency and McDonald's had no clue what was going on. It was more on this end. Walk us through with what happened there.
Yeah, so you're right. And ultimately it was an agency, a marketing agency. But we didn't know that at the time, nor do we know the name of the person who was doing this crime. So let's just kind of put it in perspective here. I've got a squad of 10, 12 agents, and we're working high priority white collar stuff, which is police corruption and healthcare fraud, which was a big problem back then. We get a call from an informant to one of the guys on my squad and says, guess what? McDonald's Monopoly games are corrupted. There's a guy named Uncle Jerry who's arranging for winners and stealing the pieces. And has been going on forever. So easy enough to say, all right, well, what's this guy's motive? I mean, this is kind of ridiculous. How could McDonald's let this happen? But it's to me, it's kind of one of these things that if it's true, you can't ignore it. You have to, it may be a remote chance, but I've got to run this down. So we start getting some basic information, some names of some winners. It all checks out. The informant gave us a couple of names of winners. Turns out these winners, we were able to associate them in terms of addresses and friends and relatives. That's right away. Now statistically, it's impossible. It's starting to check out. A lot of just, and we can talk about, traditional police work, but a lot of, or investigative work, a lot of just nose to the grindstone investigative work that went on for a couple of months, looking at phone records, making the connections, doing the charts, etc. We came to a point where we had to make a decision to contact McDonald's and bring them in, not knowing a whole lot of details, not knowing if McDonald's is involved, if somebody on their staff's involved, etc. The reason we had to bring them in, the main reason, there was not a lot of reasons, but we needed to get lists of winners. We needed their cooperation. And ultimately, we wanted to go up on a wiretap, a Title III wiretap. Well, if you think about it, the games are historical. They're past. So somebody's won, they've claimed their prize, and it's over. There's nothing going on anymore. By that time, we had made some connections through phone records between winners, between what I call middlemen, and a main guy named Jerry Jacobson, who you mentioned earlier. He was the mastermind behind this. He didn't work for McDonald's. He worked for a company called Simon Marketing. But again, we still don't really know the connections between him and McDonald's folks. But back to my point. So we've got to prove up this case currently. Historical records are great, but they're not gonna get us there per se. It's gonna take forever. We want McDonald's to run the game again. But for them to run it, why is the FBI telling you, hey, we need you to run this game and we need to be talking to you when you're running the game? In the context of that, they know there's a problem. The games have been compromised. So if you're a risk management person or an executive at McDonald's, you are now confronted with what I think it's a horrible decision. It's like what's the least worst answer? Do we tell the FBI, no way, take a hike, we can't stomach this risk, knowing that the case is probably not going to go away. We may run with it anyway, and McDonald's gets named as they're not cooperating, or we cooperate and we get in bed with them and we got to live with the consequences. And they did the latter. thankfully, and to their credit, because they paid the consequences later on with public relations, with lawsuits, etc. But we couldn't have done this without McDonald's. I said in the show, I think we expected an immediate answer. We brought them down to Jacksonville. We had them in the conference room, all the executives, and we said, hey, here's the case, here's all the stuff we got. We need you to run the game again. And we thought, well, of course they're going to say, yeah. Why wouldn't they? We're the FBI. Our reputation was still pretty good back then. They're gonna say yes. Well, they were kind of like, well, we gotta talk about this, and off they went. They got on planes and went back, and we were a little perplexed. Now I see, working in the corporate world, I see that was a massive decision that went all the way up to their CEO, who, again, I think made the right decision. We went up on a wiretap, recorded incredible phone calls, tied it all together. We did some undercover work, which I'll get into in a minute, but we were even able to tell McDonald's before the last winner, the winner that claimed it during the game they were running, knowing it was compromised. We were able to tell McDonald's, you're going to get a call from a guy named Brown in Texas who's going to claim to be the winner, a couple days before he did. We knew that because we were listening on the phone calls, and we heard we heard the passage. We actually were able to surveil the passage of the stolen piece. That's how that's Jacobson was, and I won't get into all the details, but Jacobson had figured out a way to essentially shoplift the winning piece en route where he was going to theoretically place it into circulation, and he would switch them out, put a shitty one for French fries and where the winning one was supposed to be, hang on to the winning one, and then recruit one of his middlemen to find a winner who could be trusted, and the piece would get passed. We were actually able to surveil, based on what we had learned on the wiretap, surveil Jacobson meet with Dwight Baker, who's named in this thing, in the parking lot, and our pilot saw him pass the envelope in the parking lot, and then ultimately we know Baker passed it on to another guy who passed it on to the winner. So big success, a lot of fun. Cases don't always. We had a lot of laughs with this case, and you can, because nobody's dying, and we had some fun with it. We ran an undercover operation as part of it, which we called the reunion of past winners. So we want to get winners from, hey, Pat, you won back in 1999, and we want to get you to tell your story again, because it's such a great story, and we're going to host a reunion of winners in Vegas. It's all going to be paid for. We're going to have you in a big conference room.
Brilliant.
You're going to tell your story, but in order to do that, we're going to record you right now. It's going to go on the big screen, and tell us again how you won. So we did a lot of that, got a lot of these people locked into lies about how they won. We created a production company. It was called Shamrock Productions. And the byline was, because you're just lucky, which it's a little bit of tongue-in-cheek humor there. But that was the kind of thing. And then what happened? So big takedown, national takedown. John Ashcroft presented in front of national media. It was a story all over the weekend. Actually, it was August, I think, 21st, 2001. It was still kind of a story. They were rolling up indictments, and ultimately a lot more indictments. But we all know what happened on September 11th, and that changed everything. And the dozens of agents who were working this went down to the two guys who had to carry it through, and the prosecutor. And no one heard the story until 2-3 years ago. I got contacted by James Hernandez, who was one of the executive producers of McMillions, and he had kind of stumbled on the story and started doing some research and felt it was a great story. I thought personally, I was glad to talk about it, because it was always one of these stories you would tell at a cocktail hour or something. Somebody's usually FBI, they're like, hey, tell me a great FBI story. And you need something to kind of prompt it. And I would always go to McDonald's. I would say, have you ate at McDonald's lately? Yeah, of course. All right, let me tell you about that. So I was always telling the story, but no one believed it. They would, oh, come on, that's bullshit. You're exaggerating, Chris. to have James and those guys dig into it was really fortuitous. I thought they'll get an hour-long documentary, true crime thing on it. They did a phenomenal job digging in, finding a lot more information, victims, personal stories, other subjects that it wasn't really.
What was the
relevant.
craziest part they found that you didn't know about? You're like, holy shit, what was this all about? What was the craziest thing that you found out through them, not you?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. There's about 4 or 5 things. If you watch it, there was a lot of Jerrys running around. So we had 2 they kept talking about Uncle Jerry, and there was a guy named Jerry Colombo, big heavy Italian guy who was married to Robin Colombo. And if you watch McMillions, she's a character. I mean, she's you just got to see it. I can't even describe her. She was married to him. He claimed to be a big OC guy, claimed he was connected with some families, and everybody assumed, well, that's Uncle Jerry. That's Uncle Jerry. Well, we eventually figured out that there was Jerry Colombo, and then there was Jerry Jacobson, and they met through what we believe, some organized crime connection. Jerry Colombo died and in a car crash, and there's some suspicious circumstances about that. But they and when I say they, I mean James and Brian, the producers, and their research team. They got in and they dug up archive video about how Jerry Colombo was running a strip joint up in South Carolina, that he was all over the news, that they were going to close it down. He was going around and around with city council, and he renamed it as a church. So it was the Church of the Fuzzy Bunny or something like that, and he was able to stay open. That was just these like little things that, you know what? Frankly, Pat, I'm glad we didn't stumble on that stuff during the case, because it would have diverted us. We would have been spending too much time. Well, someone's got to go. Hey, somebody's got to drive up to South Carolina and check out this Fuzzy Bunny thing, and we'd have never got to the finish line.
Yeah, you wouldn't have. It would have been a distraction.
Yeah.
Depending on the quality of the bunnies they had. But going back to it, so you're seeing these stories, and is it true that Jerry, the main guy, ended up being in the McDonald's commercial? Was he in the commercial himself? I saw something with one of the Jerrys being in a commercial, in a video.
It was the big Jerry. It was Colombo. He was, I forget where it was. That was another thing that they dug up. No, Jacobson, the main guy, kept a low profile. And if you watch it, or I'm sure the listeners watched it, remember Jacobson was a former cop from South Florida, and went out on some quote unquote disability, moved up to Atlanta, but he kept a pretty low profile up there. The other one, the Jerry Colombo, was all over. He was all over the media.
Now, where is the connection with a Mormon? I heard something about the Mormon connection to this. What does that have to do with McDonald's?
So Dwight Baker, who was one of Jacobson's main, we called them middlemen or recruiters. So when you put this thing, we would put it on a chart, and in the middle you've got Jacobson, and you have lines going out to the recruiters and the middlemen, because Jacobson never dealt directly with the winners. Obviously, that's, if you're a drug dealer, you're the main kingpin. You don't want to deal with a guy on the street. You want people in the middle to distance yourself. So Baker was one of the most recent, let's say at the time, recruiters, middlemen, happened to live very close to Jacobson in South Carolina. They were, of all places, Fair Play. That was the name of the town they lived in. I mean, you couldn't make this shit up. I mean, we just kept stumbling on how in the world, what's the chances of the main subjects of this scam that's all about honesty and integrity living in a town called Fair Play, South Carolina? But but I digress. But he was an elder in the Mormon church, and I think it was, ended up, I'm not sure, you either get excommunicated or something. He's in the McMillions film. Hey, I will say, this is, I said when I got on this, I said, I'm going to be as candid and give my opinions freely. There's a couple guys in that Dwight Baker is one, and the other one, George Chandler, who was his adopted son. He was a winner. George Chandler was a winner, and Dwight Baker gave him the $1 million piece. Neither of these guys needed the money, first of all. If you listen to them, they are in this, and they really are working hard to make themselves seem, sympathetic, honorable, not quite innocent, but pretty damn close to it. Especially Chandler. I got no room for that. These guys knew what they were doing. If nothing else, they might not have known, and this goes true for any of the winners. They might not have known that there was a Jerry Jacobson up there who was stealing the pieces, and this is who he works, and blah, blah, blah. Most of them got stories that, hey, I got a friend who got this piece, and he's going through a bad divorce, and the wife can't know about it. So you take it, you claim it, and you get $100,000, and give us the rest of the money. Well, okay, you're screwing somebody in that deal. You're screwing the ex-wife or somebody. So this bit about this was all on the up and up. I'm not buying it. There was a woman, and she's in the series, Gloria Brown, African American lady in Jacksonville, was friends of Robin Colombo. She was $1 million winner. She got a fraction of the money. They made her pay a bunch up front. Blah blah blah. She got charged. Well, she didn't have the funds to hire a big high-priced lawyer. She got the public defender. They pled her out. Pled her like 50. We had 52 some odd people in the ultimate indictment. Most of them pled guilty, all but about 6. George Chandler did not, and went to trial with an expensive attorney because he could afford it. To me, there's some inequity there, and I think if people are watching it, it goes to your point. You can't paint everybody with the same brush. There were different. If anybody was close to innocent in this, it was the people, the Gloria Browns of the world. So anyway, that's you guys can.
Do you think they're ever going to bring that game back? Because I can tell you, for me, as a marketing campaign, it was genius. Because I remember as a kid, I worked at Burger King. So it was kind of like, well, I'm about to go to McDonald's because I'm going to get these pieces. And they were sitting on our desk and we're collecting them. It's like, what do you have? What do you have? And it was always funny because you would bring your pieces to school and there was always one piece everybody was missing. There was always one piece everybody was missing.
It was Boardwalk or Park Place. One of them was always, no one could get it.
Yeah. We were missing those two. And like, hey, what if we team up together? And what if we come together? Now we realize all those young 12, 13, 14-year-old kids' dreams were crushed by this Jerry guy that we couldn't find those pieces. But give us one last crazy story until we get to the next one here. What's another crazy findings you saw that happened with this that will shock the hell out of the rest of us?
Yeah, I think they found. I don't know if it shocks the hell out of us. Well, no, I'll give you 2 of them. So if you watch it, so Doug Matthews, who everybody loves, he was the agent who worked on it, and he's still on the job. He's on film, and he's quite the character. Gets away with some F-bombs and all kinds of other stuff. And I knew he was a character. I didn't know he was quite the on-screen ham as he's turned out to be. So again, that was kind of cool. But no, and then, the producers found Jacobson's son, who was estranged, interviewed him. He had nothing good to say about him. Things like that. They took a case and made a story out of it, and that was cool. That was cool. And there's a corporate side to it too. So you've got, I've seen some interviews with the producers. I think McDonald's had another hard decision about whether to participate in the filming and production of McMillions. Again, here's this nightmare of theirs from 20 years ago. Hopefully it's all been forgotten, and now it's come back, and holy shit, HBO is going to do a story on it. Wow, that's so.
But the biggest part for me to forgive them, which in my mind I was kind of like, well, what is wrong with McDonald's? And then it wasn't us. We hired a marketing agency. We have no clue what's going on over there. Then as a consumer, I'm like, you know what, you can't, because as somebody that runs a company, I've hired marketing agencies. And one time I hired this one marketing agency for Instagram, made all these promises 6 years ago. And I'll never forget, it was myself and a local pastor in LA. We were pretty much using the same guy. And they had this machine that they were doing that was liking pictures. And all of a sudden, the hashtags they had that was liking pictures, here's a pastor getting criticism for liking pictures of nude women and men and weird random things. We're like, wait a minute, we have no idea what's going on. We hired a marketing agency. So it was a very funny yet weird situation because you still had to explain yourself. So for me on the McDonald's side, I'm like, listen, if you hired a marketing agency, I can see how something like this could happen. It was a brilliant marketing campaign, that's for sure.
Oh yeah, their revenue would skyrocket when they ran these games. They're upfront about that. It was a game changer, quote unquote, a game changer on the revenue side.